My wife betrayed me. From an unknown number I was sent photos of my wife when I arrived at that place I saw. Buried in a pile of fresh test data, I was slogging through the monotonous but crucial task for my team's month-long project on the test vehicle. Though the work was dull, I meticulously correlated and tabulated the data for analysis. Right in the middle of it, my phone buzzed with a text notification. Initially, I ignored it, not caring who the sender was. After a brief pause, I finally glanced at my phone and saw an alert from an unknown number with a local area code. Initially, I thought about dismissing it as spam, but I hesitated, considering it might be a colleague's unregistered number. When I opened the message, confusion turned to shock as an explicit image appeared on my screen. It took me a moment to process the unexpected content, a close-up of a woman's private parts, clearly showing recent activity. The text accompanying the image read, "Look closely. You still have time. Julian, 6 p.m." At first, I laughed it off as a misdirected attempt at solicitation. However, upon closer inspection, a tiny detail in the image froze me in disbelief. A mole near the woman's private parts, unmistakably belonging to my wife. Doubt and panic surged through me as I desperately tried to convince myself it wasn't true. Questions raced through my mind. My wife was supposed to be en route to Boston for an important work trip, but this image suggested otherwise. With the clock ticking towards 5:15 p.m., I realized the timing of the message clashed with her scheduled landing in Boston at 4:30 p.m. Although she usually checked in upon arrival, it was plausible she was busy with her team's arrangements. Despite the turmoil, I decided to reply to the text before taking any other action. I typed, "Not particularly original, but entirely expected. Who is this? How did you get this image? Am I supposed to meet you at Julian's?" As I prepared to leave for the day, I made a firm decision to head to Julian's, determined to get answers. I sent a text to my wife. "How was your flight? I'm going out for a bite. Call me when you're free, trying to keep things low-key while gathering information discreetly." As I walked towards my car, my phone buzzed again. Assuming it was my wife, I checked it only to find another message from the mystery sender, "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." Feeling a mix of dread and urgency, I hurried to my car and checked the map on my phone. Julian's was 30 minutes away, and it was already 5:40. I'd arrived shortly after 6 p.m., unsure of the timing's significance, but hoping not to miss whoever the texter wanted me to meet. During the drive, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my wife, "Crazy time with the team. I'll call you later before bed. Love you." I pushed thoughts of our conversation aside, focusing on the meeting at Julian's and the mystery surrounding the texter. Knowing my wife was supposed to arrive in Boston at 612, my heart raced as I parked. The texter hadn't given any clues about who to look for, so I assumed whoever wanted to meet me would know me and approach me, yet the mention of someone more interesting bothered me the most. The texter seemed to have information I didn't, and I feared walking into a trap. The image of my wife's private parts left me in turmoil. I had trusted her completely, believing our relationship was fulfilling, but the only explanation for someone having such an image was deeply troubling. And I was minutes away from confronting a reality I dreaded. Stepping inside Julian's, I let my eyes adjust to the dim lighting, unfamiliar with the pub's layout. I paused by the entrance to scan the surroundings. Ahead was a spacious dining area with a bar to my left. Choosing a seat near the end of the bar, I ordered a draft beer and continued to survey the area. My attention was drawn to a man who had just taken his drink order and was heading towards a table of smiling people. And there, at the table, receiving a drink from the well-dressed man, sat my wife, wearing her little black dress and pearls, her smile radiant. I moved mechanically, advancing towards the table where she sat. As I got closer, her expression changed from a warm smile to wide-eyed fear. Undeterred, I reached the table and grabbed a handful of the well-dressed man's hair with my left hand, yanking him back forcefully. The man dropped his drinks and stumbled backward, yelping in pain. I pulled him past and released my grip, intending to strike him with my right hand, but his quick retreat left me out of range, causing him to land on the floor. Taking a step towards him, I recognized him and sternly warned him to stay down. He, disheveled and soaked in drink, obeyed without a word. Turning back to my wife, I saw the table had fallen silent. Familiar faces stared back at me, members of her team who had shared meals and gatherings at our home. I aimed that team loyalty outweighed betrayal, except for the one who had revealed the truth. Briefly considering identifying the informant, I dismissed the idea as futile. I told my wife I was going home and suggested that if there was any hope for our marriage, she should come with me now. She nodded, but before she could rise, I gestured for her to wait and requested a moment. I addressed the team members seated nearby. I asked if their spouses thought they were in Boston. Their avoidance confirmed my suspicions. I pondered whether the whole team was involved, realizing that at least one of them was. The drive home was a blur, ending abruptly in my driveway. Inside, I grabbed a beer and sank into the living room, contemplating my acquaintances. I knew some of the team members, but the other couples were strangers. With uncertainty gnawing at me, I considered contacting the spouses, but decided against it. Instead of pursuing further investigation myself, I sent a brief message to our friends, just heard the travel plans changed. You might want to touch base on that. I left the choice of what to do next in their hands, feeling a small sense of closure amidst the chaos. Roughly 20 minutes later, I heard the garage door open and my wife pull into the driveway. I stayed in the living room waiting. She walked in, still in her little black dress, but without the provocative heels and jewelry. Calmly, she took a seat opposite me on the sofa. I stayed quiet, knowing the power of silence. I was determined to let it stretch as long as needed. She broke the silence first. "It's not what you think," she started, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You have no idea what I think," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I don't need an elaborate explanation. We both know there's no real answer to why it's just a way to justify bad decisions. So let's skip that. Tell me something simple. How long? How many times? Do our friends know? Apart from those at the table, who else is involved? Am I known as the betrayed husband among your colleagues and our friends?" "No, it's not like that at all," she protested. "Our team's travel plans got disrupted, and instead of coming home only to travel again tomorrow, the team suggested we stay in town for a down day before resuming. Where was the rest of the team?" "I didn't see everyone there," I asked, pressing for more details. "When we got the news, some of the team chose to stay home one more night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to lie to me," I pointed out, my voice hardening. "You seemed quite close to him. Is there something going on between you two?" "He's all right," she said, trying to deflect. "He even convinced the owners at Julian's not to press charges. I couldn't care less about your colleague. If he hadn't tripped, I would have hit him. Whether charges are pressed or not doesn't matter to me. I've spent a night in jail before. It's no big deal. Besides, it could make for interesting testimony," I added with a half smile. "Do you love him?" She paused, clearly gathering her thoughts. The silence stretched on, and I could see her thinking hard. "He is not my boyfriend," she finally said. "There's nothing between us. Yes, I should have told you about the change in plans, but it seemed insignificant. Whether I was in town or in Boston, you weren't expecting me, and I was still committed to the team. We were just having dinner before heading to our rooms. There was no reason for you to act the way you did. You humiliated me in front of my team." I unlocked my phone, pulled up the text, and slid it across the coffee table to her. Her face fell as she recognized the image. This time, there was no denying it. I said quietly, "Your team is very close-knit. Most of you have a small group that meets regularly. They were all at Julian's. We were the ones putting in extra effort for the proposal. You know the time I've spent preparing our pitch. I don't know exactly when it began. It was sometime after he joined the team. We worked closely together, and I was drawn to him. Things just evolved," she explained, her voice lacking the bravado from before. "No explanations needed," I interrupted. "Falling into bed doesn't just happen. Decisions are made consciously. We both know that, so please don't insult me." "So almost 6 months, I answered one of my own questions. That's when he joined, right?" She nodded. "The team?" I continued. "All of you." I trailed off, not needing to name it. She nodded again. "He said it fosters trust and team unity. Is that what convinced all of you to form this group? Now you're being crass. It's more than that." "I feel a strong connection to him and my team, more than ever," she asserted confidently. I sensed trouble brewing. "Unfortunately, you may see some changes in your team soon," I warned. "What did you do?" she gasped. "Involving others will only cause more damage. Let them make their own choices. We need to focus on us," she pleaded. "I can't stay silent and be complicit. I care about them." In fact, I like them a lot more than some others right now, I replied. I texted them about the changed plans. How they handle it with their spouses is up to them. I can live with my decision. We have the most productive team in the company's history, she practically yelled at me. And you benefited too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays didn't mean you missed out. I never denied you access to me whenever you needed it. So I slept with my team, big deal. You never noticed that picture you showed me. You want to know about it? She sneered. That was right after he finished inside me. Yes, he came inside your loving wife. What you don't see is another team member. She took the picture just before she went down on me. So now you know. You never had seconds or tasted another man's seed. If you don't know, it didn't happen, right? I listened in shock as the extent of the deception and my own ignorance unfolded before me. Now, just because I was aware, just because my fragile ego was bruised, she accused me of wanting to throw away all that her team and she had achieved. My wife hissed, her anger escalating. My heart rate rose as she passionately defended her team's questionable dynamic, my own anger growing by the second. For a fleeting moment during my drive home from Julian's, I entertained the idea that perhaps forgiving him just this once could be possible. However, that notion quickly met its demise. I didn't need to hear any more, and I certainly didn't want to, but she persisted. No, sir. We won't let you off the hook. You're going to text back, informing them that you heard from me and that we were stranded in Atlanta but have reservations for the morning. That's the story. The team will stick to the story and you're going to back them up, she shouted. There are millions on the line with this deal, and your hurt feelings mean absolutely nothing. Send the text and then we can discuss our next steps. Discuss our next steps? I retorted. There's nothing to discuss. You're leaving now. You and your twisted team, including your ringleader, can continue however you like. We're done. I'll be contacting a lawyer this week to start the divorce. It's a straightforward 5,050 split. You keep your retirement and I'll keep mine, I declared. Go on. You have reservations in town. Use them. Head off to Boston and chalk up another victory for you and your team. Ethan, please send those texts, she pleaded, her tone softening. If we lose them before the presentation, the company could lose millions. You and I could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just think about all the places we could go with that money, just you and me. Forget about this and reclaim my loyalty. Please, Ethan, don't let some irrational concern about meaningless encounters derail us. The team says I'm on the fast track to executive status. All I have to do is keep delivering results for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us? She implored. Just leave, I managed to say before I was struck hard in the back, knocking the wind out of me. I fell to the floor, gasping for air with a knee pressing into my back. Don't hurt him, she interjected. Too much, she added, almost as an afterthought. Still undecided about breaking my nose, my attacker taunted, leaning in close to my face while I lay pinned on the floor. She must have set me up, I thought. Now I know whose side she's really on. Well, see whose nose gets broken, my attacker sneered. Get his phone and type those texts for him. We don't have time for this nonsense. Someone yanked me up from the floor, just one person. I feigned injury, causing the person behind me to exert extra effort to help me stand. This provided me with vital information. My captor was a weak office worker, already wheezing from the effort. I focused on catching my breath and refocusing on the situation. Unlike the polished salespeople, my team operated in the field with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment SOAR, based in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. My group of engineers, while not as elite, spent time with these crews during test missions. This camaraderie led to us being invited to improve our physical conditioning under the guidance of seasoned soldiers. We designed the equipment needed to access and exit hazardous locations, taking pride in our modifications that contributed to successful missions and the safe return of everyone involved. One man stood out among the 160th Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, renowned within his community. Everyone, from recruits to high-ranking officers, respected him for guiding his men through global missions. Known for never leaving anyone behind, his reputation was solidified during a mission in Colombia when the FARC ambushed their group. Sergeant Hayes noticed the young LT platoon leader performing well until he saw him on the ground, bleeding from a head wound. The medic declared the LT was dead, but Sergeant Hayes lifted him into a fireman's carry. When the medic reiterated the LT was gone, Sergeant Hayes responded, "That might be true, but he's still coming home with us." Despite the more than 5 kilometers trek through dense forest back to the LZ, they managed to return unscathed, carrying the LT. Upon their return, the medic informed the doctor that the LT had died, but the doctor, using a penlight, confirmed the LT was alive. Sergeant Hayes' actions became legendary. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He was a relic in an age of convenience and disposability, meticulously crafted and unique, holding a special regard for my team and me. During downtime between missions, Sergeant Hayes taught us basic hand-to-hand defensive techniques. "It's better to know something just in case," he advised. "I understand the biggest threat you're likely to face is a malfunctioning copier or a nasty paper cut. But if you remain in this line of work, you may find yourself in some colorful locations. If you encounter one of the local colorful inhabitants, you'll have something practical to rely on," he explained. "But let's hope a paper cut remains the scariest thing you ever face." I regulated my breathing and allowed myself to appear subdued in my captor's grasp while recalling the techniques taught by Sergeant Hayes. There might be times when you feel powerless and can only endure the beating. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The key is to remember that even when you're taking a beating, you can still fight back. You just have to outsmart your attacker. I remembered the lesson and subtly resisted, gradually wearing down the lone man's strength. "Give me the phone," my attacker demanded, glaring at me. "Now you know I've been with your wife and that every guy on the team has had their way with her. Forget this tough guy act. You're nothing but a weak, submissive nerd. Do as we say, and maybe you'll still have a chance with her when the team isn't using her. Don't forget about all the luxuries you can afford with her bonus. That should ease the pain. Maybe she'll even buy you a robot for those times when she's busy," my attacker mocked, taking pleasure in my humiliation. I bit my tongue, trying to control my rage as my attacker demanded to know where my phone was. Spotting the outline in my shirt pocket, he reached for it with his right hand. In one swift motion, I stepped back with my right heel, striking my captor's shin and causing him to stumble in pain. Flexing my arms, I broke free from his hold as he yelped and collapsed under his own weight. My attacker's eyes widened in recognition as I rolled my shoulder, just as Master Sergeant Hayes had taught me, and drove my clenched fist into the center of his face with full force. I felt the bones shatter beneath my fist as a gush of blood poured from his nose, sending him crashing to the floor. Turning around to see who had attacked me, I saw my captor lying on the floor in tears, clutching his leg and whimpering that he thought his foot was broken. I forcefully stomped on his foot, causing him to scream in agony. "That should clear up any uncertainty," I remarked coldly. I turned my attention back to my primary attacker, who was on the floor with his hands covering his face, trying to rise to his knees. Approaching him, I leaned in close to his ear and said, "Looks like your nose took the punch. Not willing to take one for the team, are you?" Then I delivered a powerful punch to his temple, knocking him out cold. My adrenaline was pumping, and my breath was ragged as I scanned the living room for my wife. Suddenly, I felt a sharp impact on my back and neck, dropping me to one knee. I spun around to confront my new attacker and saw my wife standing there wielding a cast-iron skillet. Her swing had missed. Suddenly, I felt a sharp impact on my back and neck, dropping me to one knee. I spun around to confront my new attacker and saw my wife standing there wielding a cast-iron skillet. Her swing had missed, grazing my side. Rising to my feet, I roughly grabbed the pan from her hand. "James, we can still salvage this," she pleaded, her tone desperate. "Think about the money we would be giving up. I promise I'll end the affairs and cut them off. We can go back to how things were between us." Rubbing the back of my head with my left hand, I stared at her, astonished by her sudden transformation. She reminded me of the shape-shifting alien in John Carpenter's The Thing, adapting to each new challenge. I smirked at the thought. Misinterpreting my smile as agreement, she moved to embrace me. I held her back with my left hand and, after a brief moment of consideration, swiftly struck her nose with my right hand, fracturing the bone but not rendering her unconscious. She cried out and slumped to the floor. "It hurts like hell," I remarked. Tears streaming, vision blurred, breathing labored, and blood everywhere. "It works every time." She expressed her distress, questioning my motive for punching her. Unapologetic, I explained. I struck you because I could. I continued recording the incident, convinced I had enough evidence to justify my actions despite the potential negative portrayal. Reflecting on the advice from Master Sergeant Hayes about decisive action, I surveyed the room. My attacker was in distress, and my wife was trying to stem the bleeding from her nose while the others remained still. I acknowledged the success of saving someone, giving credit to Sergeant Hayes. Turning back to the aftermath, I expressed my frustration about the consequences for the others involved, lamenting the missed opportunities and potential financial losses. I contemplated involving the police but decided to delay the call to maintain my chance to question my wife. Kneeling beside her, I demonstrated how to address her nosebleed. As the adrenaline subsided, I felt a sudden loss of energy. Sitting across from the woman I thought I knew, I questioned her actions. "Rachel, what were you thinking?" I asked, disappointed. "Is becoming a vice president really worth all this?" "It could have been if you had gone along with my plans," she admitted, regretful about the setback caused by the incident. "What about the future of our relationship and the persistence of deceit?" I pressed. "There's always a possibility, James. Deceit might continue," Rachel acknowledged. "Our team leader warned me about your rigid ethics and idealistic views. He said I needed to break free from your influence to achieve success." "When did he give you this advice?" I asked, my voice cold. "You have no idea about my relationship with him," she retorted. "Following your suggestions for career enhancement yielded only a few commendations. It wasn't until Ava offered guidance that I learned what truly worked for women in the workplace. Engaging in carnal relationships for career advancement was not only effective, but also enjoyable." Still recording the conversation, I processed this information, curious about the timeline of Rachel's actions. "Did your involvement in these activities begin before he entered the picture?" Expressing impatience, she disclosed, "I initiated these actions at the company's Christmas party a year after joining. I've been committed to this approach ever since." "Wait, you're sleeping with the boss too? Max Donovan?" I asked incredulously. "Yes, James. Max, Marcus, Lucas, anyone on the team who could help advance my career. It doesn't cost me anything to share some closeness. It's easy to manipulate you men when I can lead you around by your desires, especially you. Show a bit of cleavage, and I could guide you wherever I needed. Even now, thinking you have it all figured out," she continued, a smug smile on her face. "We informed Max of our location when we headed here. Right now, he's gathering the rest of the team, crafting a cover story for our absence. They'll have to make the pitch without us, but the extra effort with their purchases should pay off." "Do I really want to hear this?" I wondered. "Oh, what the heck, why not?" "Extra effort?" I prodded. "You always were a go-getter, Rachel." "It was so easy, I hate to even call it effort," she laughed. "The old joke, the worst sex I ever had, was great. At the conference, it was straightforward with the men. Brenda, the token woman on the selection board, required some extra effort to win over. It's ironic that I could even seduce a woman, but I had to bring old Marcus into the mix for good measure. She was curious about women, at least temporarily, and that curiosity vanished around the time I started making her promises with my tongue. Once we began working together after securing the contract, we had the selection board under control. "Why are we resorting to all this?" I asked. "If everything is set, why the heavy-handed tactics?" "That was Marcus' a bright idea," Rachel said, rolling her eyes. "I told him to back off, that I'd come home, take care of you, and still catch the flight. But no, he had to act like an alpha male, and look where that got us. Now, instead of celebrating our victory, I'm stuck dealing with Max. As I said, it's fixed, but it's going to set me back." "You wouldn't have been able to buy me off so easily," I remarked. "Maybe not," she replied. "But I still would have made the flight." "Well, you're definitely not making that flight now," I shot back. Recalling how Marcus seemed so informed, I suspected Rachel had a transmitter. "Max, are you listening?" I demanded. "I'm about to call the cops. I'm certain we're looking at several felonies here, and we haven't even touched on the fraud. This is a federal contract, right?" "Yeah, the feds don't look kindly on, how did you put it? Extra effort." "I'm sure you have excellent lawyers, Max, but maybe there's another way," I suggested, letting the words linger. Rachel's phone rang with hail to the chief. "Max," she answered. "Sure, I'll put you on speaker." Max's voice filled the room. "First, let me apologize. Marcus' actions were a gross lapse in judgment. I assure you the board will handle him appropriately. Thanks, Max. That's reassuring. It's good to know you and the board take assault and fraud seriously, I said. These are unfortunate allegations, Max continued. Lawyers will get involved, but nobody wants to rock the boat. We might pay a fine. Marcus and Lucas could get community service. Ultimately, though, you'll end up divorced and half as wealthy. Is there an alternative here, Max? I asked. Rachel always said you were the clever one. Still, I'm glad we hired Rachel. Yes, James, there's an alternative. We at CR have replaced you in your wife's affections, and when you found out and confronted her, you were treated poorly. Shocking, Max interjected sarcastically. James, Max pressed on, instead of calling the cops, how about we come to an agreement? I just sent a snap to Rachel's phone. One of my tech guys sent it. It should disappear after viewing. Have a look. It might restore some goodwill. Rachel opened the snap and showed it to me. I saw a Bank of Grand Cayman and a very large number. When will that be deposited? I asked. It's already there. You'll find an email with the account number. This has been a terrible day for you, James. This decision isn't easy, and I understand the emotion involved. Rachel is a very desirable woman, but emotions don't pay the bills, do they? No, they don't, I agreed, mimicking Max's clipped aristocratic tone. CR will cover the cost of your divorce. You can't reconcile, that's clear. Rachel will file. She'll take her personal belongings and retirement. I paused to weigh my options. I could stand on principle and expose everything, letting the chips fall where they may, or I could walk away. Max had given me 5 million reasons to choose the latter. Does CR have a medical team, Max? I asked. Yes, we have physicians on retainer, Max replied. Good, I said. Send a few over here in a limo to pick up your team. Are we in agreement? Precisely, Max echoed. Are we done? I asked. Goodbye, Max, I said, ending the call. I pocketed my phone and turned off the recording app. I knew you'd see it our way, James. We can still be friends with benefits once this is over, Rachel said, attempting her most charming smile. But even her bright smile couldn't hide her bruised, bloodied face. Her eyes were blackening, and dried blood was crusted around her nose and chin. I found the sight amusing and allowed myself a grin. Misinterpreting my smile, Rachel leaned in to kiss me. I raised my hand to stop her, gently pushing her back until she fell onto the couch. My expression turned disdainful as I questioned why I'd ever want to kiss her. Leaving Rachel hurt and looking up at me, I declared my decision. Take whatever you want by the next day, I said. As I walked to the door, I paused beside my previous attacker and asked about his foot. Ignoring his complaints, I kicked him in the groin, making him curl up in pain. Approaching the other attacker, who had managed to sit up, I assured him I wouldn't hurt him. His relieved smile quickly vanished when I pressed my foot into his groin. Writhing in pain, he watched as I left the room. I climbed into my car with no clear destination in mind, but the immediate needs of food and shelter loomed large. I stopped at a drive-thru for a burger, and then checked into a motel just outside of town near the freeway. Sleep claimed me as soon as my head hit the pillow, exhaustion overriding the physical pains from my various injuries. The next morning, I reluctantly dragged myself out of bed at dawn. As I brewed a pot of motel room coffee, my phone buzzed with a text message. Eagerly, I picked it up and read the message from an unfamiliar number. Sorry about yesterday. Can we meet at TGF at the mall? I'll wave you over to the bar. Ryan. He'll be there, I replied, pouring the tepid coffee into a paper cup. Determined to get things in order, I set up my laptop for some online banking. Reflecting on my college days, I recalled my economics professor's sage advice to keep an offshore account for emergencies. With my professor's assistance, I had set up a bank account in the Cayman Islands, my go-to-hell fund. Over the years, I had diligently saved, amassing close to $50,000. Feeling a rare sense of pride, I knew my fund was about to get a substantial boost. Logging into the secure banking site, I transferred the bulk of the payment into my personal account, leaving $100,000 in the original account. After a quick shower and change of clothes, I headed out to meet the mysterious texter. Arriving at TGF just past noon, I spotted a man waving at me from the bar. The man, around my age, was well-dressed and had a friendly demeanor. I approached and took a seat. "You sent me a text?" I asked. "Yes. I'm sorry for how things turned out." "There wasn't an easy way to break the news to you," the stranger began. "Start with who you are and your connection to Rachel," I requested. "I was part of the team. After 8 years in the Army, I was wounded and medically discharged. I joined CR about 6 months ago and was assigned to Marcus' team 3 months ago. While talking to a friend about the job, I mentioned working for Rachel. When he asked for her full name, we realized we had a mutual friend. He asked me to look out for her. Initially, everything was fine, but about 2 months in, Rachel made her move. She's very attractive and persuasive, but when I asked about her ring, she just smiled and said you were okay with it. I wasn't and told her so. That's when the trouble started. After rejecting her, I got all the worst assignments and constant grief from Marcus. I called our mutual friend and told him what happened. He said it didn't sound like you to pimp out your wife and that you needed to know. Marcus sent me a photo as an incentive to join the team, kind of a reward if I went along. I didn't agree with their methods and resigned yesterday. That's when I sent you the text. Our mutual friend? I asked. Yes, Daniel Hayes. If it weren't for him, the stranger paused. Let's just say he got me out of a tough spot when I was a rookie. I owe him. We both do, I acknowledged. What are you going to do now? He asked. Max laid it out for me. I could involve the cops, and sure, Lucas, Marcus, and Rachel would face legal trouble. But with Max's lawyers, it would be just a bump in the road. We made a deal. You might think I'm selling out, and maybe I am, but they took something irreplaceable from me. If I can't get justice legally, I'll get it another way. Rachel is less irreplaceable than I thought. I've got a trip planned. Tell Daniel thanks for everything. I won't be going back to work. And you? I asked finally. Daniel spoke highly of Baxter, Inc. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. They do things differently there, challenging, but without the corruption. The perks won't match Rachel's team, but it's honest work, he replied. I smiled in agreement. The stranger stood up, and we exchanged a nod before parting ways without another word. Fast forward to Monday, I had just checked in for my flight to Costa Rica, anticipating the relaxation in Tamarindo. I headed toward security, spotting a mailbox. I pulled out an envelope addressed to the DOJ in Washington, D.C., containing a thumb drive with the recording. I thought it might intrigue them, considering Max's legal team might not be as unbeatable as they thought. I dropped the envelope in the mailbox and proceeded through security. 9 months later, seated at my usual table in a Costa Rican cafe, I received mail from Anna, who brought me my beer. Thanks, dear, I said, raising the bottle. Holding the envelope, I wondered who had found me. Not making much effort to stay hidden, it still would take considerable resources to find me in this small Pacific coast town. My first thought was that Max people had tracked me down. Letting the envelope sit for 2 days, I felt confident it wasn't a bomb. Still, one could never be too careful. Carlos, I called out to the cafe owner. S, Say, or James, Carlos responded. I handed him the envelope and stepped back a few paces. Better safe than sorry, I thought as Carlos opened the envelope and handed it back to me. I thanked him, took another sip of beer, and emptied the envelope onto the table. Several sheets of paper fell out. The note on top read, "Thought you'd find this interesting," along with a phone number. Daniel, I thought. Daniel would have the resources to find me. Flipping over another sheet, I found a newspaper article with a picture of Marcus, Lucas, Rachel, and Ava being led out of the CR building in handcuffs. The headline read, "4 indicted in multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." I smiled. Maybe Max's lawyers aren't as invincible as they think, I mused aloud, a habit I'd picked up since my Spanish was weak and English wasn't widely spoken. I liked hearing English, even if it was just my own voice. "Ana otra cerveza," I called, holding up my empty bottle. "Es se or." "Gracias," she said as she accepted my beer, took a sip, and gazed out at the deep blue Pacific.